ICMJ for the opportunity. It was a trip of a lifetime, and today I just want to talk through some of the lessons taken away from the Japanese value-based marketing model for their beef industry, and some lessons for Australia. So agenda for today, just a definition on what VBM actually is in relation to the beef industry, a quick breakdown and background on the Japanese grading system, their selling system and the benefits of it, why it has been so successful, or the gap that is starting to appear in it. Based on that gap, some of the future directions for the Japanese industry, and then some lessons for our industry back home based on this. So what is value-based marketing? So the definition we're using at MLA is translating consumer demand drivers into price signals so that value is created, captured and shared through the chain. So critically, we're starting at the consumer side, who then create those demand drivers, create rewarding price signals through the capture of value. So just a breakdown on the value chain. So value is created by designing the value chain from the consumer side, so that right-hand side, and then passing demand drivers back down the chain through that transfer of valuable data and feedback to breeders and owners. Data and feedback move forward through the chain, so along the chain as credentials and backup signals that improve decisions at each step. When production, processing, and marketing are aligned, value can be lifted, captured, and shared through the chain. So if we now dive into the Japanese grading system, it's a system that's administered by the Japanese Meat Grading Association, and it is the combination of two independent scores, one being their yield grade, the other being the meat quality grade. The purpose of the grading system is to ensure producers are paid fairly for the product they produce and help buyers determine carcass value. So the yield grade specifically is a score from A to C. It's determined by a formula based on measurements taken at the grading site, which is the ribeye between the 6th and 7th rib, and a little diagram there of how those measurements are taken. Won't read through that formula, but essentially A is the top score, and that's a yield score of above 72, and B and C sitting below that. So under 69 is considered below standard. The quality grade is a grade from 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. It's assessed on 4 different factors, being marbling, meat colour, texture, and fat colour. Each is assessed independently, and then the lowest grade is given to the carcass. So if 3 out of those 4 factors scored 5, but 1 scored a 3, the quality grade of that carcass would be a 3. Marbling as an example, so that Japan uses the beef marbling standard, which is a scale of 1 to 12, and that graphic displays how those 1 to 12 translate into that 1 to 5 score. So the 5 grade is a beef marbling score anywhere from 8 to 12. Putting those two together creates then the final grade. So the yield component, the quality component, obviously the highest grade is then A5, and then a matrix there on the right of how grades go from that point. Higher grades attract step change price premiums. These differences between the grades are commercially meaningful, meaning producers are incentivized to create practice change to target these higher grades. Grade differences drive commercially meaningful price premiums, incentivizing improvements in quality and yield performance in their carcasses. So how the value is actually realised is the carcass auction system, which was fabulous. We were lucky enough to go to the Tokyo meat market and see this in action. So unlike in Australia, where our traditional selling models are over the hooks or vertically integrated systems, Japan uses carcass auctions. So cattle are slaughtered, processed, and graded before sale, and then every day, at the Tokyo meat market, up to 500 carcasses are sold with bidders, so 25 to 30 of them representing wholesalers and retailers through Tokyo, bidding on each individual carcass based on its grade and its other quality attributes to arrive at its final price. So what this means, all carcasses are sold based on their grade, meaning producers receive the value that is actually delivered. Unlike in Australia, where often producers receive payment and pricing based purely on weight and fat, not the actual full attributes of a carcass. Producers receive payment and feedback on a per carcass basis, meaning breeding decisions can be impacted with this information. High performing genetics retained, poor performing genetics removed. And there's been huge uplift in the Japanese Wagyu industry as a result of this. So this is a graphic that was shown to us by Professor Kichida at Obihiro University, showing the increase in A5 product produced over the last 2 decades. So back in 2006, a little under 14% product graded A5, through to 2024, getting up to 65%. So it's a huge increase over that time. And you can see in the less bold lines, the other grades reducing over that time as the shift up occurs. And the carcass auction system and the value-based payment model has a large part to do with this. So the individual carcass feedback and pricing payments create incentives that has increased that rate of genetic gain in their industry. Has seen a significant rise in A5 produced. So Mr. Masaki Takada, sorry about the pronunciation there, is a CEO of a large Wagyu supply chain in Japan. Recently shared some learnings with the Wagyu Edge conference just last month, and he actually said, as of 2026, over 70% of carcasses are now grading A5, a feat that is being achieved through their value-based payment and feedback systems. So just a rough comparison to the Australian carcass performance to give some context. So that A5 product relates roughly to an Ausmeat grade of 8 or 9. There isn't a direct comparison, but roughly 2025, 1.4% of carcasses graded that 8 or 9. That's not there's a lot of error in that number. So that just includes MSA graded carcasses, which is about 50% of carcasses produced each year. We know that there's a lot of those higher end Wagyu brands that don't MSA grade. So the percentage is likely a little bit higher than 1.4, but again, just puts into perspective, it is much lower than that 70% that Japan is producing, demonstrating the significant structural difference of our industry to theirs. But for some context, in 2015, that number was 0.04%. So there has been a very slight shift, an uplift over the decade. Compared to Japan, however, if I just go back, 2015, we're at sort of 20-ish%. In a decade, they've gone to 70. So huge uplift in that same time period. Again, demonstrating the benefit of their carcass auction system and practice change that can be achieved when price signals are received. So how has this system been so successful? Producers are breeding and feeding to a known outcome, that target grade that they know they're going to be rewarded upon. It's a very tightly controlled grading system that is trusted. It's not underpinned by objective measurement yet, although there is want to move in that direction, with MIJ getting significant uptake in processing plants in Japan. However, there is a gap starting to appear, and that is, if we go back to that definition of value-based marketing, it starts with that consumer that creates those demand drivers, and the consuming willingness to pay, as I'll get onto, is starting to slip. So the success story we've been through, it's an industry renowned for their A5 quality beef, and producers target that A5 grade for their price premiums. with over 70% now produced. But consumer preferences are shifting. So the demand is actually moving away from that high marbled product. As a result, there is now a significant oversupply of A5 in their market as production outpaces demand. So value is being defined and rewarded based on outdated consumer preferences. What are these changing consumer preferences? As has been touched on, so Harriet mentioned as well, that Japan are beginning to prefer a lower marble product, partially driven by a younger population from a health conscious perspective. Again, Mr. Takada at Wagyu Edge noted that growing preference for lean meat in Japan with A5 grade beef beginning to be shunned by some, as a quote that he shared. So an image on the left of retail product that we saw in Japan. So MLA's marketing initiatives are trying to take advantage of that by promoting our Australian product as lean, healthy, and fresh. So I mentioned price incentives a couple of times. So this is these couple of figures are demonstrating that price premium reduction over time. So in the 2000s, A5 over A4 product, there was a 20% price differential, back down to 14, so a drop of almost 7% in that sort of 20 years. The story keeps going down. A5 versus A2 was a huge price premium of 67% back in the 2000s, reduced sort of 20% back to 47. So those mid grades, the sort of A2, A3, A4, their price is increasing, but the A5 product has not. So those differentials are greatly reducing. So essentially, Japan is now in a market or in an industry, a value-based marketing industry without that target market. So producers are still aiming to produce A5. There is a prestige and there is still a high premium for it. Maybe there should be a look at shifting their production systems to try and reduce their input costs to produce a lower graded product, but just the price incentive and differentials aren't as great as they could have been. That's a possible learning for the Japanese industry. But as the market moves away from that product, there is an oversupply, and that Japanese industry hasn't responded yet. So value is being defined and rewarded based on outdated consumer preferences. Additionally, their industry is not set up to export. So while there would be global demand for it, Japan are only exporting 3% of their annual production. So the future of the Japanese beef industry. So there are some innovative supply chains and brands beginning to look for new traits outside that traditional grading system as a response to this flooding of A5 to look to differentiate their product. And some of these measurements are being enabled by objective measurement. Two I just want to touch on briefly in marbling fineness and their fatty acid composition, so monounsaturated fatty acids. Starting with marbling fineness. So the size, distribution, and texture of IMF fat flecks within the muscle graphic there. So all those three ribeyes have the same total amount of marbling, but there is a scale of the left-hand side being that coarser marbling and the right-hand side being finer. Japanese studies have shown a higher palatability associated with that finer marbling, related to an increase in carcass value. This does differ to research conducted in Australia. Pete, I'm sure you might want to comment on that. My hypothesis is possibly in that very high-end marble product. So when you're getting a significant amount of intramuscular fat, that fineness does have an impact. Whereas a bit of the research done here domestically is not necessarily in that very high-end product. So that could be where the research is differing at this point. But brands are beginning to want and market their brands and their product based on having a finer marbling. Similarly, fatty acid composition. So the monounsaturated fatty acids, specifically oleic acid, which is one type, has been shown to improve the eating quality of beef. So essentially, it's related to a lower melting point, creating a richer texture and more juicy product. Again, Mr. Takata noted that there's within the industry there's a shift from the amount of marbling to the quality of the fat, which is referring to this. And again, brands are beginning to market their product with this on their box and on their brand. So there's some stamps on carcasses, there's some banners used at butchers and those sort of things. And yeah, 55% it seems in the Japanese industry is that sort of point where premium is put on it. So over 55% oleic acid considered premium for some brands and their marketing as such. So this is being unlocked by OM. So historically, the fatty acid has been a lab measurement, but there's a couple of OM advancements that are enabling this to be rolled out as an inline measure in plant. So MIJ there on the left, Soma on the right. We were lucky to visit both of these while we were in Japan and sort of talk with the developers. And then on the far right, that's a carcass auction screen, and that MUFA being advertised with those carcass attributes. So again, that's driving that carcass value and price received. So summing it up with just a couple of lessons that I've taken away that could be useful for our industry back home. So that huge potential for accelerated herd improvement if feedback systems and really importantly price premiums can be introduced. So in some supply chains, those feedback systems are starting to operate pretty well, but critically it's that price incentive that we need to begin to introduce if we want to see really considered and consistent practice change. So that's essentially a move towards that value-based marketing model. Went through just then a couple of the new traits that are beginning to become important in Japan that may follow here in Australia. Again, these are being underpinned by OM. They're really important Japanese word of warning of making sure that we always have our target market and current consumer insights in mind as we're producing that product. So what has worked for 20 years doesn't necessarily work today. There's always that need to update insights and change and pivot as the consumer and the market does. And then lastly, just that really big opportunity that continues in Japan. So they're obviously producing a lot of that really top high-end product, but their consumers are probably demanding more of that mid-marble product that we produce so well. So huge export opportunities remain in Japan.